Hello and welcome to your 8th tutorial on CSS. Today we'll talk about CSS Special symbols and selectors. And to start off, we're going to make a div and we're going to give it the class attribute and we're just going to give it a D1 value. And so go ahead and give your div some text. You can add anything that you'd like. And so using our CSS internal style sheet, let's give it some properties. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in a dot and our selector, which is D1 in our case, and we're going to open and close our curly braces, and inside we're going to give it some properties. So the first thing that we'll add is the background color property, and I'll just give it a simple grayish color. And the next thing is width, 200 pixels, and let's add height as well for 50 pixels. And lastly, let's add in a border, 1px, so 1 pixels. Let's make it dotted and black. And so when we save and refresh, we get our box. And so as you can see, it's sort of overflowing because I have too much text. And so to resolve this problem, what we can do is we can add a property which is called overflow. And let's add in the hidden value. And so when I save and refresh, you can see that my text disappeared. However, it's still in this box. So with this hidden value, our overflow is clipped and the rest of the content is hidden. And so we can make our properties for our box a little bit bigger just to see it better. And let's save and refresh. And so as you can see, I don't need overflow as my text actually fits in this box, and I can add a little bit more text. And so here we go. So if I save and refresh, and so now when we save and refresh, we can see that our text is now clipped as we're using the overflow property. And so now we can just get rid of height as we don't really need it. And so as we can see here, using our overflow hidden element and using white space property with the no wrap value, we get this structure. So now our text is just lined up on a single line due to white space no wrap, and it's hidden. And so instead of hidden, we can also add in a text overflow property, and its value is ellipses. And so now when we save and refresh, we'll get ellipses instead of just our text being hidden. And you can just go ahead and change up any of these sizes or any of these measurements. And as you can see, we get a change, and you can change the colors to be exact for your website. And so let's get rid of some of this text as it's just way too much. Here we go. And so let's move on and let's create 3 more divs. And let's do this with ID. And let's name the first one wrap1. Close your div. And let's duplicate this. Make them 2 and 3. And so let's give them some properties using our CSS code. So what we're going to do, as you remember, we're going to give our selectors a hashtag and we're going to write their names. So wrap1, comma, this one is wrap2, and this is going to be wrap3, and we're going to open our curly brace and let's also close it. And inside, let's give it some simple properties like padding 10 pixels, and let's also give it a border 7 pixels, and let's have it dotted, and the color 000, so a simple color. And let's also give it height and width properties. Height is going to be 200 pixels and the width is going to be the height is going to be 150 pixels and the width is going to be 200 pixels. And let's also add in the float left property so we have them all lined up right next to each other. And so when we save and refresh, we get our 3 divs next to each other, and so this one doesn't fit, so it's automatically moved down. And so let's also add in a margin and let's give it 5 pixels. And let's give it a background picture. So let's type in URL. And inside let's type our file name. So mine is bgpic.jpg. Close this and let's also make it a cover. So background size cover. And so when we save and refresh, we should. And so let's add in a picture. So we need to add in the folder where it's in. So mine is pictures gifs, and we add in a slash and your file name for your picture. So mine is bgpic.jpg. And let's also make it a cover. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in the background size property and we're going to give it the value cover. And so when we save and refresh, we get this background in our borders. And so let's talk about the individual boxes, and let's just give them individual properties. So let's do something for the first one, and so we're going to write a hashtag and we're going to write wrap1 and we're going to open and close our curly braces. And so inside of the first one, let's write the background origin property, and we're going to give it the value border box. So this is how it's written. And so now when I save and refresh, and so what we need to do is we need to add a no repeat over here so we can see what's actually happening. And so when we save and refresh, you can see that these two are by default starting they're starting just after the dotted lines, if you know what I mean. However, this one is starting just where the dotted lines are, so they're kind of being seen through these little holes from the dotted lines. And so let's next up just copy and paste this and let's change it with wrap2, and let's change the border with padding And let's also add some text in our divs. So let's just write text. And so we're adding text just because we want the padding to be seen. So now when I save and refresh, you can see that I get some padding here. And so this is the default value. The background image starts from the upper left corner of the padding edge. And lastly, let's just add in a wrap 3 selector. And let's change the value to content. Save and refresh. And so as we can see, it starts from the bottom, so it's actually the upper left corner. It starts from here, and however it's still like the border box down here. And so let's do the last thing, which is the content box. So this will basically start from the upper left corner of the content. Let's change this with wrap 3 so we can see what's happening to the third one. So keep a close eye on this. And so as we can see, it starts from where our content is, which is our text. That's why it sort of got a little bit smaller. And just to summarize, the background origin property basically specifies the origin position of a background image. And so let's move on and let's comment on our code. And over here as well. So we add in an asterisk and a slash. Here we go. And so now let's make another div in our body div, and let's make a p tag inside of our div, and let's also close this. And so for our p tag, let's write something like hello world. Close your p tag, and let's duplicate this. And so now when I save and refresh, we just get this simple text. And so let's give it some properties in our CSS code. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a div p selector, and we're going to open and close our curly braces. And so this selector is basically for everything inside of our div. It's for every single p tag inside of our div, so it will affect these 3 p tags. And so inside, let's just give it a background, and let's write yellow. So now when I save and refresh, you can see that all 3 of them got the yellow value working. And so what we can do now is, and so if I were to, let's say, just cut this out and paste it after the div, save and refresh, you can see that it does not work. So this selector is specifically for the p tags inside of the div. And so if we want our measurements to work for both any of the p tags in the div and for just p tags, we need to write in a comma. So now when I save and refresh, you can see that these two sort of get joined together, and this one is here all by itself as it's just after our closing div tag, so it is not in the div. And so next, let's add in a nav tag, which is navigation. and let's give it a p tag, and let's write some text, and let's close our p tag, and let's also close our nav tag. And so now when we save and refresh, we just get this. We can see that it still works as it's still in a p tag and it's in our div, and it would still work if it was just outside of our div. And so what we can do is we can change our comma with an angle bracket, and it should be to the right. And so when we save and refresh, you can see that it only works for these two, as this symbol specifies that anything just after the div tag, so anything just after the div tag should be using our given measurements. And so as we can see, nav p isn't just directly after div, that's why it's not working, and so is hello world. And so if we want it to work, what we have to do is we have to change this with a plus sign, and when we save and refresh, you can see that the only thing working is the tag just after our closing tag. So this is for that, so the plus sign. And so if I duplicate this and I save and refresh, it will not work. So it only works for the tag that is directly after our closing div tag. So let's change this with a tilde. So that is basically this. So it's like the wave symbol. And so this will allow us, so this will allow the two p tags after the closing tag to work. And as you can see, we have both of them working perfectly fine. And so let's move on and let's create a input type. And let's write text, and let's give it a name, and text again, and let's close it, and let's add a line break. And so let's make 3 of these, and let's name the second one search, and let's name the third one password, and let's also change the types as well. So we change this to search, and we change this one to password, and when we save and refresh, we'll get our input types just up here. And so let's give it properties using CSS. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in input, and in these square brackets we're going to write the type, and let's open and close our curly braces, and inside, and so inside let's give it the background property, and let's give it a color, so something like aqua for example. And so now when we save and refresh, and so let's just delete this name attribute from the last input, and let's change this type to name. And so now when we save and refresh, and so now when we delete this space and save and refresh, it will only work for the elements that have the name attributes in their code, which are input type search and input type text. So these two have the name attributes, however password doesn't. And so let's just add the name password back, And so let's change this input name with input type equals sign, 2 quotation marks and password. And so now when we save and refresh, you can see that it only works for the last one, as that's the password input, and it's the only one that has type password in it, as these two have search and text instead. And so we can do the same thing with text. And now when I save and refresh, it will only work for the first one, as that's the only one that has type text. And now what I can do is I can add something like text line hello. Instead of this text. And when I save and refresh, you can see that it still works, as the first word is text, and that's what's required from our input in our CSS code. And however, if I delete this line and now save and refresh, and so let's say I were to delete this text bit and now save and refresh, and so now let's move on to something else. And so if I change the search one to text and I save and refresh, it won't work as there is no line in between. And so when I add in a line, and so let's say I change this to name, so that will apply to anything in the name attributes. And so when I save and refresh, it won't work. And so when we save and refresh, it won't work as there is literally nothing between these two. And when I add in a line, and so let's add in a straight line just after name, which is this line, and we keep in text. And so we get the first one working as we have the text here. And so input type text, if I add in a line and I write hello, and I save and refresh, it will still work as there is a line. However, if I delete this line, we can see that it just immediately stops working, as it just detects that the first word isn't hello and it's just the word text hello. And if I add it back, it will work perfectly fine, just like we saw beforehand. And so if we were to change this line with a $sign and save and refresh, we can see that it does not work even with this line. And let's say we were to bring this to the end of our text. So instead of it being at the front, it will be at the back. And we can see that it works. So this $sign basically implies that anything at the end of our name at the end of the attributes, the name attributes end with text. So if anything at the end of the name attributes end with text, it will detect it, and basically the properties will work for it, just like it did right now. And so we can do something else. We can change this entirely to name and insert an asterisk and an equal sign, 2 quotation marks, and let's say SSW. And so now when I save and refresh, it will only work for password, as SSW is only in the word password. And we can do the same thing with other letters, so ORD or pass or whatever, and just have a go and change them up yourselves. And so yeah, that was all that I had prepared for today. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.